We are joined by the wonderful Maria Vitória Ramos from Fiquem Sabendo in Brazil. Some of you may already know her from her fantastic presentation at TICTeC in London in 2024. I think it was a highlight for lots of people, including myself. If you haven't come across their work before, Fiquem Sabendo is a non-profit newsroom and data agency that uses Brazil's freedom of information laws to unlock public data and make it useful for journalists, civil society, organisations, and the public. I'm doing a bit of Maria's work here for you. I'm sure she'll tell us more about it in a second. But yeah, today Maria is going to take us behind the scenes and show us how her team prepares freedom of information requests and supports journalists to uncover the stories that matter. It's such a great opportunity to learn from one of the most innovative transparency organisations from around the world, and so we are so lucky to have you, Maria. Um, Tiny quick bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded and we will share it around afterwards. It will go up on our YouTube channel, and we'll also have time for questions at the end. So please feel free to drop those into the chat. And yeah, I don't think there's too much more to say. I will keep letting people in as we go through. Thank you so much, Maria. I think I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Julia. I also see some Brazilians coming in. That's fun. Thank you, My Society, again, for opening this space for me to talk to Europeans or maybe some people around the world. I'm very excited. So I'll share my screen. And as I do that, if anyone wants to turn on the Zoom captions so you don't get caught up on my accent, and I'll try my best to make myself understandable. Can you see my full screen, Julia?
Yes, we can. Looks great.
Awesome. So, Fiquem Sabendo, we call ourselves agents of public transparency, trying to empower citizens to question their representatives and actively participate in democracy. I'm not going to go a long way about us, but this is our team, well, roughly, because we work remote, so we never get a picture of all of us, but we're around 15 people all over Brazil. And for the last 7 years, we've been working and consolidating ourselves as the main reference in right to information in Brazil. You see, sometimes I'm saying FOIA, sometimes I'm saying ATI or RTI. There's a lot of acronyms in English, but they're all mean the same, right? So to this date, we have had quite a few impactful initiatives. We've uncovered over $100 billion in secret public spending. The data sets and documents that we've unlocked have been used to produce over 10,000 news stories in Brazil and abroad. We've trained over 5,000 citizens. A lot of those are journalists. And we've been able to pass 3 new national laws for improving access to information in Brazil. Just a quick information. I like to say that Brazil is the 8th biggest economy in the world. Sometimes I feel like people don't realize how big we are. And we are a benchmark in transparency. As I talk on the 2 TikToks that I've been to, I see how sometimes people are impressed by how good our ecosystem is. And I think a lot of that is due to journalism. Our FOIA was written by and lobbied by journalists that were working in the US and saw the Brazilian journalists who worked in the US and saw the importance of FOIA. So since the beginning of our whole ecosystem, it's been really deeply attached to journalism. By the way, our FOIA is only 13 years old, so it's pretty recent, but it's one of the top ones globally. Everything here is digital, which makes it much easier and more accessible. And I'm going to try to show you how you can also use journalism as a powerful tool to make right to information broader and better implemented in your own countries. Just Fiquem Sabendo, I know Julia said a newsroom. We are more of a organization that is working on the backstage of journalism. It's one of our branches, but we work together with advocacy, training programs, and developing civic tech. Uh, the process here, I think it's interesting because it shows how critical journalism is. But what we do is basically we file over 2,000 FOIA requests a year. With that, we find where transparency hasn't reached yet. So you can see this first story is not one of our cases, but it's the case that made me fall in love with RTI when I was a journalism student and followed to found Fiquem Sabendo at 22 during journalism school. So this boy is Gabriel. Gabriel had a heart that wasn't working properly. The Brazilian NHS found a heart that was matching, and it asked the Air Force, the Brazilian Air Force, to bring the heart from Brasilia to Recife to make the operation. Everything was ready to go, but last minute, the Air Force used that airplane to bring a politician to spend the weekend in Rio de Janeiro, and the heart didn't arrive. Vinicius Sassini, which was a reporter from O Globo, was following Gabriel's case, and he was a pioneer in using FOI in journalism in Brazil. And he did two really simple FOIA requests. He asked the NHS how many denials of transportation for transplanting organs they received, and then it's all good. Okay. And then he also asked the Air Force all the flight logs for politicians. And matching these two data sets, he realized that in 3 years, over 150 lives were lost due to an absolute lack of priority in the use of public resources. And the day after he published his news stories, his news piece, the government created a regulation obliging the Air Force to always have a plane ready to go for transplanting organs. And in 1 year, almost 300 lives were saved due to these two very simple FOIA requests put together with the power of journalism. So imagine maybe just these requests were just in a My Society database, or were just there waiting for something. It would not have had this life-saving impact, right? Now moving to three examples of our own. We had this historical victory in a controlling agency, and we unlocked over $100 billion in public spending that was spent without any oversight whatsoever for over 100 years. That was over 4 years of work, but most importantly, it powered over 2,000 news stories all over Brazil, generating a national debate over a topic that was completely forgotten or unknown, or a footnote in controlling agencies' reporting. And it mobilized the public to change the law for these benefits. And a lot of the benefits were canceled due to wrongdoing. And well, yeah, we've got some this is Brazil's biggest newspaper. We got front page, huge news stories everywhere. And that was due to a task force that we created. Actually, we had to do a lot. I tried to simplify it here because we don't have a lot of time. But basically, it was this huge data set completely without any standards, a lot of problems. We had volunteers using Python and R to program and create a usable data set. We corrected all the mistakes that we found with the technicians inside the government. And then we work with 10 big journalists from competing organizations to work on this data set, because when you have a big enough data set, you can put them together and they all will find scoops, and it's good for everyone. Agenda Transparente is a tool we developed to monitor lobbying for news investigations. And it's been used widely to cover politics, but also really impactful stories when we work with independent journalism that goes really deep into one specific subject. So with Reporter Brazil, they used our tool to investigate the lobbying for a pesticide that was very lethal for bees. It's prohibited in Europe, in the US. And after the reporting was published, it generated a national ban on that pesticide. So it also shows how impactful one news stories can be for everyone. And finally, on case studies, we also opened the Bolsonaro secret spending on the government's corporate cards. That included over $1 million in questionable expenses, including hundreds of kilos of premium steak, carnival travel expenses, jet skis, yachts, and a lot of other stuff. And it also generated, it also was done through a task force with partner reporters, and the impact was immediate. In 6 months, we had over 4,000 stories published nationwide. The Attorney General launched an investigation. They opened a public consultation on how these corporate cards should be managed going forward. The controlling agencies demanded some reimbursements. There is a whole story published by Muck Rock that you can, it's in English, so you could go look for it. But now we're going to move to the fun part, which is the how-to, right? Julia and Gareth really asked me to try to explain step by step how we mobilize journalism around ATI. And I tried my best. Let's see if it's comprehensible and we can chat at the end. So why invest in journalism? First, of course, is awareness. If citizens don't even know they have this right, how will they claim it when it's threatened? Journalists are the most loud voices that you can have to defend access to information. And here in Brazil, we've had a few instances where presidents or very powerful people try to create really bad setbacks for freedom of information, and they would have been successful if it was only the few organizations that are specialized in ATI that were working on it. You know, we would have been overpowered, and journalism was fundamental in the survival and amplification of our ATI laws. They also are very useful when you're trying to create new regulations or break barriers that have a lot of political will against it, right? So one of the, like, really the thing that changes completely the negotiations we have with the government is when a big article is published in the big newspapers or on TV. It changes the playing field completely. And yeah, so this is a bit like of a quick timeline of how it happened in Brazil in the last 7 years. So it's not that long term, but it's also not that short term, right? But when we started, when we founded Fiquem Sabendo, it was 3 journalists and 1 lawyer. And it was, we would say, like, out of the 5 journalists that used FOIA at the time in Brazil, 3 of them started Fiquem Sabendo. And then we created this really impactful newsletter that really delivered chewed information, you know, never before seen data sets and documents that could be used freely by any journalist. They only had to say those data sets were obtained through FOIA and by us, of course, but mainly we wanted to get the public accustomed with the term, people hadn't, our law is very new, so people even hadn't heard what is freedom of access to information. And then the first step was they started publishing stories based on the data that we gave them and started learning how we did it. So the inspiration part was very important. If you talk to journalists before this newsletter, and of course, a lot of other works by other organizations, but this was very impactful. They would say FOIA is not for journalism, it's too slow, it's too complicated, we have a fast-paced environment, those who knew what it was were against it. Most of them didn't even know. So the first step was really showing them, hey, it's possible to use FOIA for journalism in all these different areas, in health, in education. And so here are like clear examples of these amazing data sets that you would die to have to report on. And this is how we did it. With the inspiration and also tutorials, they start to experiment themselves, going to investigations that we hadn't proposed to them. And then there's one really important thing in journalism, which is the position of where information is placed in a news story, right? So the higher it is in an article, the most important it is. And we saw FOIA going from like the last line, just being like, this news story was based on FOIA, to going up and up, paragraph by paragraph, until it's usually now like the second phrase a reporter writes when it's telling a story. And then FOIA became itself newsworthy, right? That was not the beginning. First, we had to show them how it was useful for them. And then when they all loved it and it became a tool very important for their work, they started reporting, oh, FOIA is getting worse in this aspect. We need to push forward on this. Here are the worst states on FOI. So they started fighting for better implementation because it was a tool useful for them, not because it was an important cause for us or other organizations. So it's a long-term but very high impact investment. And we're going to go step by step, but just like a glance at it, it's first you need to understand how journalism works, map the areas you have good information about and which reporters covers those. Chew the data and package it, and then create an internal process to carry reporters with you. Literally, it's almost like get in the car, we have the whole car working, you just jump in and it will show you the way. And then you need to, match your working plan with the news cycles that already exist. The first thing is journalism is a very broad term, and there's many aspects inside of it. We'll look a bit at the three biggest types, but you need to understand what types of journalism exist, what types of professionals are in the newsroom. It's not just reporters. What is the daily routine like? So we all know journalism has been, devastated by big tech and social media. So there's not, it's very few reporters that are able to cover one single area with depth. Most journalists are just like doing many news stories at the same time in all different areas. They have a really chaotic routine. So if you don't understand how hard their life is, you're not gonna understand how to breach that and feed them what is important to you. And then I think the most important thing is reporters want data, exclusive, relevant, different, unique information that they can add value to their own work. No press releases about the importance of FOIA or commemorating FOIA's birthday or the International Day of Freedom of Access to Information. That's really, really rare to be, if it does work and someone publishes that, it's not going to have any relevance. It's not gonna, get clicks or big spaces in the print paper. They want stories, and they will mention FOIA inside the story. Um, and then a very important thing is to create a network and invest in those relationships. It doesn't happen overnight, and preferably, I wouldn't start jumping from one journalist to another. Like, find a few that are good partners, that you understand each other, and then you keep feeding them, especially if it's, you know, you gave them this document that they were able to create a news story on, and then you found another document that complements that story. Don't give it to another journalist or a competing one. Give it to the same one that did the first reporting, so they can build on that and also strengthen the relationship with you. Try to create an exciting atmosphere. So here in Brazil, the acronym for FOI is LAI. And we have this whole, this name that we started, and now everybody calls themselves a lie lover. So the FOI lover, and it's kind of like a community. Um, Offering trainings is a really big strategy to get journalists on board. So we've done many programs. So FOI in the newsroom, FOI for communicators, FOI in indigenous territories for indigenous communicators. And it works very well. We also have had a recent experience of offering reporting grants. And I think that I'm not sure actually if I would do that more in the beginning or after you've gathered the experience of how journalism works and what it wants. But out of the 8 reporting grants that we gave this year, 4 of them, which were like first time, female Black journalists writing for the first time big stories, 4 of them are competing for journalism awards this year. So we're very excited about that. A very important thing is to package the information. I know there are some, websites like Muckrock or My Society. What do they know? That you have, a searchable database with the FOIA requests themselves. But like I said, journalists don't have the time, especially in the beginning when you're trying to show them that there's any value in FOIA. So for us, it was very successful to have this, bi-weekly newsletter that goes to 20,000 journalists now, and it gives them exclusive data. But you can also work, instead of just publishing a report on something, again, not a report about FOIA, but a report done using FOIA for a specific purpose. So this is a report we did where we got the data of how much green area each public school in the capitals of Brazil had, and matched those with the profile of students, showing very clearly the structural racism when talking about climate change. And instead of just publishing it and hoping someone picks it up, you have to create this whole strategy where you have an embargo, you get your partner journalists with the report a month before so they can work on their exclusive look at that and publish it with you in the same day. This idea of like getting many journalists to publish in the same day as you publish something, or they all publish it at the same day, is a really good strategy when you think about how the news ecosystem works. Because if you get 2 of the leading journalism voices in your country to report on something, all the other ones will have to follow. The editors of the competing newspapers will be like, you need to get a story about the pensioners as well, because CNN and that other one already have that story. And then you can really, amplify the impact. When you match this idea of understanding journalism, understanding who you're talking to, and how to package the information. Try to apply the product roadmap concept. You need to interview people, you need to talk to them, understand what is the actual problems and pains they are experiencing and as journalists in the UK, in the Netherlands, and create solutions tailored to their needs. So yeah, our newsletter is called Don't Lie to Me, which is like we have FOIA, so you can't lie to us. It has over 20,000 subscribers. It's been going on for a while now, and it was our main tool for a long time. Also, be really clear and offer supporting materials. Remember that journalists now are covering many topics at the same time, so make it easier for them. So here, example, we publish with, and also partnering with organizations that are experts in that specific field. So we partnered with an organization specializing public safety, and we publish a guide on how to obtain public safety data for journalists. And then also very important in that timeline, after we inspired them and they saw the value in FOIA and started to experiment themselves, it was very helpful to have our wiki FOIA, which has not just the explanations, but like really copy and paste requests that you can make on areas that are very, interesting for journalists, like childcare availability or the control in guns or, president spending. And so they see the inspiration in your newsletter or whatever. They have their own idea, but then you also give them the steps on how to do it themselves. It's very important that they know they can rely on you, right? So like I said, carrying them is like really being there with them. First is journalism is very fast-paced. You need to be too. If you take 3 days to answer an email, you're not useful to them, you're not reliable. We usually, we have WhatsApp, depending on which country you are, and then we're like prioritizing answering them really quickly. And also not just like with data sets that we uncovered, little by little, those partners that were most reliable or most, got big columns in big newspapers, we have like WhatsApp groups, which each one of them and their team and our advocacy team. And our advocacy team knows it's a priority that whenever they say like, hey, I was wondering, is it possible to obtain the flight logs of the president? Our advocacy team answers really quickly saying, yes, we can do the request for you if you want. So we do a lot of the work for them. And it's great to have data analysts in your team that are also available to them. Data journalism, there are very few data journalists. They don't have a lot of data analysis capability in newsrooms. So if you can offer that, it's really, you're going to get a lot more news stories if you give that data arm for them to use. So when we're talking about chewing the information, it's just simplifying the process and feeding them with like practical, usable information and cleaning all the noise. So in our newsletter, it will usually be like, we already get the main leads, the most important things that we get from the data. So like 80% of the government's schools are not receiving medical professionals. Here's some other few key highlights from this data set. Sometimes we give them infographics or graphs, and then we suggest possibilities for investigation. So, so we gave you this big total number that is very impressive, but if it was us, we would go investigate how this is playing out, city by city, or cross this data set with these other few options. So we really like, because we don't have the arms and it's not our purpose to do the reporting ourselves. But since we have journalists in our organization, and our newsletter is done by a data journalist, we already offer some suggestions, and that works very well. And also explaining all the attention points, like, hey, this data set says this, but the methodology changed in that, because usually when you get the request, right, the answer has like 3 pages of the government explaining all the things in the data. If you just link that, they're not going to read the entire FOIA response. So just give them what is really essential about that FOIA response that is crucial so they don't do any mistakes in their reporting. Pay attention to what's happening. Of course, timing is everything in journalism. And it's even better if you can make ATI useful for mainstream topics and culture. So, for example, Brazil's most famous football player, Vini Jr., has been suffering a lot of racism in Spain. And we got the telegrams from the Brazilian embassies talking about how they're working with the Spanish government to, stop that racism. Or a really big one, and also that I know there's someone from Open Knowledge Brazil here. They did a very good job on that as well, on exposing how much mayors were paying for famous artists to perform in their public events. And that's like generates a lot of, awareness from normal citizens who would not go for a news story, would not go for ATI, but they know the name of that artist that they like or they hate. Create a news cycle calendar, right? So it feels like journalism is completely unpredictable. And I fear that it's a bit harder for you in depending in which country you are, from what I've heard, because in Brazil, we have really like, um, you know, most of the FOIA requests are answered, between 1 month and 6 months. So it's somewhat controllable and like when you're going to get an answer. But even 20 days, it's too long for journalism if you're going after the fact, right? So if you wait for something to happen and then you're going to think about a FOIA request and then file and then appeal, and that once you get that data, you've lost the news cycle. It's already gone. So you need to start earlier than everyone so you can actually, get the train when it's leaving the station. Help me out in the chat if you can think of things that happen in a season, So here in Brazil, every time between July and September, it's fire season in the Amazon. And you most certainly will get a lot of news stories about the fire in the Amazon. So a few months earlier, we start getting data and documents related to fire in the Amazon and getting it all ready, and also like sometimes giving an advantage to a few of journalism partners, giving them the data sets, 2 weeks before our newsletter goes out. And did I skip something? Yeah, I'm gonna come back for a slide later, but help me in the chat with like examples from the country you are in where, every year something happens. So also like the week before Carnival, we always drop a data set of the traffic points or the accidents. The week after Carnival, like the amount of accidents that happen and during the past carnivals. And the journalists love it because they need stuff to fill in a 24-hour coverage of Carnival, which is a holiday. There's very few people in the newsroom, and that gets us really far. And also some data sets that we know they love, like drugs seized by point of entry or amount of guns seized by the police. We update them every year or every 6 months or every 3 months, depending on how we saw journalists like to consume that. Also, they love rankings. Rankings are easy to report on, and also gives them some, if you always drop a ranking during a dry season. So, like July is usually a dry season because school is out, Congress is off, or those 2 weeks between Christmas and the beginning of classes. Like, there's very few journalists in the newsrooms. There's no editors. They don't have a lot of topics to cover, and then you feed them something that is easy to use and very effective in improving regulations and implementation. Um, Finally, positioning yourself as an expert source in something broader, preferably broader than right to information, so like public transparency or public spending. And usually you start with, interviews, and then you write one opinion article here, one opinion article there, and then maybe finally you can secure a regular column in a newspaper. Like, we have a column in the biggest newspaper of Brazil where, we have a lot of space and amplification to write about FOI. Give me just 1 second. All right. And also, when giving statements to journalists, I've been in both hands, like getting statements from experts and giving statement as an expert. Just be very, like, remember, journalism counts each letter and space. So don't give 3 phrases as an answer. You give one powerful, concise phrase with a normal vocabulary, no technical language that the journalist can use. Don't give, like the whole history of something and all the caveats, like concise and powerful. Finally, and I'm going to open so we can talk, a few bonus tips. Write and speak like a journalist. Here's the inverted pyramid, which is sometimes very opposite to what people from academia or, somewhere else are used to. It's just like the lead, the most important thing, I write my column with my co-founder that is a lawyer. And now, after a whole year of us writing together, I can see how he is changing completely. But every column of his started from the Constitution. It would be like, the Constitution assures right, the right to public access to information, and in a republic, this is very important. Blah 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 blah. And like in the 4th paragraph, we would have the topic in hand. And now I can see that after a year of me, like, we start with the most important thing. It goes like, the first sentence is, the government just closed a data set with 17 years of documents showing how it was transferring money to the states. And then you can say which laws are related to that and blah, blah, blah. It's very helpful to have a journalist in your team, because as much as we try to explain, it's a completely like different way of seeing the world, right? So our advocacy team that is, done by lawyers, they really love FOIA. So they're always FOIAing a lot of stuff. And then they come very excited to us, like, hey, I got this. And we're like, nobody cares. Like, that's not a thing. That's a thing that you like because you are a very nerd that loves this specific topic. But like, no one's gonna, like, no journalist is gonna care about this. Or, this is from a really old time. It's a different way of seeing the world. So try to have one in your team. Always agree in advance with the journalist that you're partnering with how they should credit you, and make sure that they explicitly refer to FOIA. And yeah, help your partner newsrooms apply for prizes. So whenever, new journalism prizes appear, we're like, oh, that data set that we gave to Folia, they produced a really cool story that I think would fit this prize. We write to the journalist being like, hey, what do you think about, filing that? Because sometimes it's not going to come to us, but it does give us, more impact and credibility. So yeah. I also would have like a few more stuff right here, but I think I'm gonna open for us to talk to while I come back to this slide that I think I just skipped it. So, Julia, do you want to
Yeah, we
maybe
have a nice question from Lizette in the chat, so maybe we start there, but we have a bit of time, so we can also go back. And yeah, sorry for that interruption, everyone. I think we had a Zoom bombing incident, but yeah, we'll edit it out of the recording. And Maria, that was fantastic. I love your honesty and everything that you do. You're such a fantastic presenter, and I learned loads. So our lovely question from Lizette: Can you give some examples of the topics you write about in the national newspaper? You talked about having a kind of calendar view, but are there some things that like are always a winner, always a hit, a thing that you think that if you've got limited time, some topics that we could focus on? Yeah, some sort of format or target certain topics was Lizette's question.
um hey Lisette, I miss you. We had we were together for a little bit in Amsterdam. Um so our strategy was journalism is very fast-paced. You need the latest info. So, like, if you have an amazing data set of 20 years, an economist or an academic would die for it. But if you don't have the past 6 months, it's useless for journalism, right? They're not going to write a story about something that you only have data until, you know, uh, if it's not like a clear time, like, oh, this period is this president's mandate or some sort of like clock, timing. So our strategy was always to just like, shoot a million bullets at a time to all different agencies, all different topics, and then just like filter the golden that comes out of it. Because every time it's much harder when you have like this one specific topic that depends in this one or two agencies that can be really bad agencies or, and then you're depending on them and they're taking too long and you don't have information ready available for journalists. So we've, you know, we cover like we shoot our shots to education, health, entrepreneurship, sports, everything. But if I were to choose, I would, of course, choose like the three biggest topics. Usually, it's health, education, and public security, but not usually. That's in Brazil. Public security is a very big thing, but probably in the Netherlands not. So it depends on where you are. Also, like here in Brazil, anything related to the military personnel is really big because we're only like 40 years after a military dictatorship. We almost had a coup 3 years ago. So anything that has military in the name always goes really big. Um, and yeah, I think it's hard to say like specific topics because, each country has their own focus. But once you realize those, like build on them, and update those every 6 months or something. Um, some examples. So, mm, yeah, like I said, military, drugs, gun control, um, access to health for kids. Like every year we update the amount of kids that receive cash transfer programs that have been accompanied by their health professionals or not. That's always a big thing. And public spending, like Public spending can be from, like how much this senator spends, but also like the investment in combating deforestation in the Amazon and how it's being up and down and usually simpler things. I don't know if I was able to explain well is that one thing, but
I think that was really helpful. Yeah, thank you so much. I had a couple of questions myself, if that's okay. And then yeah, if you do want to cover anything from your remaining slides, that'd be amazing. The first was a simple one. For your training programs, do you charge journalists to come to them, or does it depend on the kind of training that it is? No, they're free. And then do you ever get accusations of kind of political bias, or how do you handle those when you are dealing with such political topics? Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
rule of law, never expect money from journalists. Okay, so not journalists, not newsrooms. They cannot be your source of income. They are very poor, very stranded. Nobody has money in newsrooms. It's it's an industry that was decimated in the past 30 years. So no, they are a tool for you, like a space that you invest in. They're not a resource source. So what we do is we get money from someone else to train journalists, right? So Internews funded our program to train indigenous communities. The British Embassy funded us to train the female journalists and the reporting grants. The Canadian Fund funded us to do the program in newsrooms. So they're not going to just get money from someone else because you're going to be in just like it's not going to work, right? Um, and then the second question was bias. Amazingly, we don't have any haters on social media. Even after 7 years touching very, very sensitive topics. But I think the big thing is you can clearly see in our posts, in our newsletter, in everything that we are literally shooting at everyone, like for every party, every level. There is no, and also we are not doing the final reporting most of the time, right? We're just saying like, hey, society, here's all the data. And then 20,000 journalists from 20,000 different um, uh, ideologies, and they cover the same thing with their own interpretation. So we've been able to skip that.
Amazing. Yeah, that is really, really helpful. And I see what you mean that when you're casting the net so broad, then that definitely helps. Lizette was asking about have you experienced any of these data set requests becoming proactive disclosure? That's always nice when we get to see that. And Mikhail, yeah, making a mass information request tool, making it available to them for a fee, but potentially asking anything. Yeah, as you were saying, charging journalists for anything is kind of hard. Yeah, interesting questions.
So I'll start by Mikhail, and then remember me to come back to Lizette. I think you would be shooting yourself on the foot, because the value that they can offer to you is much bigger than any like fees you're gonna get from them. We've been cited in over 10,000 news stories. Imagine like how much better it is to get funding from big donors when you have all this credibility and name recognition. We have an indicator, a KPI that shows through our clipping agency, we're able to see that we've got 400 million reais, which is $500,000 in spontaneous media in value. So meaning if we would pay to be advertised in the big newspapers, on TV, for people to know who Fiquem Sabendo is, it would have been less effective because it's just advertisement. And we would have paid a lot of money for it. So just in ad money that you would get, it's a lot more valuable. But I think it's just really like it's the most powerful community you could have to protect the right and to advance them. Because most of the people who use FOI in Brazil now are journalists. And they're like opening the doors and making the things happen. Because it's one thing to have the law, right? And as I've heard a lot of like complaints from European countries, it's like they just don't answer, or it takes them a million times, or everything is secret. Like journalists love to report that the government is putting something under secret. The government hates it and opens it because the journalist said it's on secret. They're not going to open it because Fiquem Sabendo or My Society says it's secret, because we don't have the social pressure that journalists are actually able to have, you know? Um, so I wouldn't, yeah, I would give everything for free for journalists. Our tool, the one that we developed for Agenda Transparente, um, at first, like we were gonna charge lobbyists and give it for free for journalists. But then actually, it was supposed to be a tool to generate recurring revenue from journalists. But then we learned that that's not a real market. And then we said, okay, we have to sell it for lobbyists. And then we were like, okay, but we don't like that because that's against our mission. So now it's just free. But every time we think about something that would be paid for, it would always be free for journalists because they bring a lot more value to the table than whatever money they would be able to pay. And then Lisette said, oh yeah, if the dataset request resulted in proactive disclosure from authorities, yes, especially when it's something that you make journalists love because they are very annoying. For example, one time we gave this data set that we opened through FOIA on how much public servants were spending on app-based cars, right? So like how much were they spending on Lyft? And then journalists really loved that, and they started asking every month for that data. And then the government got tired and created this whole portal for Lyft spending, just so they didn't have to answer the same question. So they also give you this mass, like it's one thing for the government to receive one request, but receiving multiple and every month, then that really, goes to the proactive disclosure. Do you track other KPIs around these processes? So, yeah, we have two major KPIs that we sell to donors. One is the media value, because it's a very like the market understands that, and there's also something about being, yeah, like they understand what's the value of spontaneous media. Um, and then also we use some OCDE studies to say that usually anything that is exposed reduces in 10% the corruption. We use the 1% to be really safe. So out of everything that we've uncovered in public spending, we say that we've saved the government the equivalent of 1% of that amount. So in clear words, what we tell investors is our return of investment is 1 to 700. So every $1, every R1 invested in us results in a 700 reais not spent by the government in problematic spending. Someone's trying to get in. Okay. Do you try to make journalists file the request themselves, or do you not really care? Yeah, so that's what I said in the timeline. Like it's a step by step. So I would start by doing the requests yourself and giving the results to journalists. But then once they like taste the value of it, they'll start doing their own requests, and that's when we supply them with tutorials and materials to help them do their own. And that's really important in scaling and making the FOIA better, just like me and the three other organizations that work on FOIA in Brazil, we would never have been able to turn a law that was barely functional into very, very functional, at least in the federal executive government, in less than 10 years if it was just our teams working. So, like now, you have thousands and thousands of journalists using it daily, and that, it's a completely different scale than we would be able to. Um, but what is their incentive to file themselves? Um, they're what what you're gonna try to show them with the process that I gave you is how useful it can be for their jobs, right? So journalists are always being asked by their editors to come up with exclusive stories, with new data, and they don't like they have a limited known resource. So everybody is reporting on the UN report on migration. Everybody's reporting on the same like macro reports from big organizations, and they need scoops, they need exclusive data. So if you show them that FOI is a way for them to get scoops in a way that it benefits not only the newsroom, but personally themselves. FOI is a huge asset for new journalists. Like when you're not a big old credible journalist that have those sources that will give you, like up-to-date information from Congress because they've trusted you in the past 30 years. If you're just like a new intern and you have FOI, you might outdone the old, famous journalists, and that's really like a really big jump in your personal career. So their incentive is to do a better job, be more recognizable. Like it's not to help FOI, it's for them, and then they will help FOI and they'll learn how important it is and help FOI intentionally.
I think that's such an inspiring note to end on, and I totally see what you mean that like, yeah, you can provide amazing, show the value of FOI, but then it's almost a challenge to the new journalist to be like, what data sets can you think of that Fiquem Sabendo aren't already looking into and yeah, get that scoop themselves. Maria, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I learned so much. Your honesty and like powerful, like everything you do is so cool and so inspiring. And I think I have some things to learn from you of just like what you were saying about don't talk about FOI just for the sake of FOI or the anniversary of FOI, but like what is important and what other people care about is a good reminder for me. Just because I think about it every day doesn't mean other people do. So yeah, super helpful. Thank you so much. And we will share this recording afterwards. And yeah, thanks everybody in the comments. Oh, look at that. Lots of nice people saying well done. And yeah, couldn't appreciate it more. Stay tuned for more of our webinars. We're having one more in December that we're just working on planning. And yeah, thank you so much, Maria. Round of applause to you, and have a lovely rest of your day, everyone. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.